what empowers young people to make decisions and get the best opportunity for themselves? That's what the series is about. Today, I want to thank you for just an awesome conversation here we're going to have about the expansion and ultimately the statewide deployment of dual language learning, particularly for our earliest learners, but certainly that will carry all the way through their high school graduation and beyond. Again, this is third of about 9, so stay with us through the end. We're going to do these for every couple weeks for the rest of the summer and fall. And I think the picture you will gather by the end of this is a state that is very much looking forward. How do we become, make progress to become the best state in public ed in the United States of America, with an eye on our both friends in competition in Asia and Europe and parts all around the world. Our students deserve the opportunity in their public schools to genuinely say they went to the best education system in the country and ultimately in the world. And that is what we're trying to build out. So let's get into it here a little bit. Today, we have 42 school districts and tribal compact schools operating 102 dual language programs. And it's serving about 35,000 students. We have doubled this in the 5 years that I've been superintendent of the state. I want to thank our legislators, both in a bipartisan way, both chambers.
Recording in
for
progress.
the latter part of the last 3 or 4 years, they have invested in startup programs that have allowed us to help school districts build and design their dual language programs, get them operational, and then start to roll them out with great success. It is more than just Spanish language. I think one of the questions we get a lot is what languages are comprised in this. It is obviously dominated by Spanish, given that 2/3 to 3/4 of the Western Hemisphere speak Spanish as their first or second language. But it is also, there are programs in Chinese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and we have 5 of our tribal communities, 5 of our tribal compact schools engaged in dual language learning as well. Their youngsters are learning native language, English at the same time, and they are exchanging that language with traditional and first English language learners. It is powerful, it is remarkable, and it is transforming lives. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. 3,500 students in the state of Washington last year earned the seal of biliteracy. This is in 83 languages, which makes the state of Washington the #1 state in the United States of America already for the way and the volume of languages that students can earn a seal of biliteracy. By way of reminder, this has a pretty rigorous assessment component to it. Students are demonstrating proficiency in their primary language as well as the second language or third that they're acquiring. So the standards here are high, and we have 3,500 young people in this state who achieve this, and we're growing that rapidly. And again, we're #1 in the country right now for how many languages we offer that up in today. You can see that the growth, not just in the number of programs, but in the number of students has been stunning. It's fantastic. Most of this growth is in early grades. Again, most of us are oriented around world language being offered in high school, maybe 2 years or 3 years. A lot of it is a function of college admissions requirements. The growth that you see here is almost extensively in elementary school. These are 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds getting into a dual language program early, and then the school district adding a year every year. So then it's kindergarten and 1st grade, and then kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then 4th grade and 5th grade. So the student gets an entire experience of multilingualism while they're in their elementary school. Again, we're in 102 buildings, nearly 40 school districts. It's now 35,000 students. We're going to take this number through the roof in the next 4 or 5 years. So here's the why. The research is so clear. The demonstration of increased cognitive success for students, their literacy development is obvious. It's a literacy program, but not just in the second language they're learning. This enhances their skills and abilities in their primary language. We talk about cognitive flexibility. When students are in early language programs, the way their brain is being mapped, their ability to make connections, master language, and then make connections to other subjects, math and science and PE and health and social studies, it all gets enhanced through the power of language. This is what our partners in Europe and Asia have been teaching us for many, many decades in this country. Their students take language very early. It is not something they do at the end of their education cycle merely as an admission to college, but it's embedded because they are cultures long in history that have to understand each other, and for purposes of economic opportunity and mobility, they got to know languages. They've got to know languages to be successful. The United States can no longer believe that an ocean on one side and an ocean on the other side keeps us outside of that global economy. We know it from a capital investment standpoint, and now we have to think about it as human development and the ability for our young people to be successful no matter where they go. Language is the core to that. It's designed in its best state for multilingual learners. Most of you have an orientation to this as I speak English, I want to learn Spanish, so I take a Spanish class. Or we have students whose first language is Spanish and they're learning English. The most successful models are what we call two-way language. These are students in a classroom, maybe half of whom are Spanish as first language, or tribal language is their first, or Chinese Mandarin is their first language. And the other half of the students, English is their primary language, and they're essentially learning each other's language through exchange. We see really cool programs where maybe Monday and Wednesday is one language, Tuesday and Thursday is another language, and Fridays maybe they're flipping it around a little bit. Whole subjects in the second language. The learning that occurs is foundational and powerful. What they do with each other to learn is just remarkable. It is more than a teacher in front of them walking through language instruction. It's that everyday engagement in that language. That's that sort of intensity that we don't often get with our late cycle programs, where you go to a standalone class, I go to fifth period, I take my Spanish class. You don't get the immersion that is possible, that's powerful in a two-way dual language program. These programs are obviously proving to be very successful. You saw the growth in them, the confidence in them. We have a press release today where students talk in their own words about the power of this. And I keep making nexus here to the business community. We've got 9 out of 10 employers in the US that say their business in part is multilingual focused. They have more success when they have multilanguage learners. We know this. You need a software engineer if they're doing business in Japan or Russia or China. We know this in retail. We know this in restaurant. We know this in manufacturing, in agriculture. This state's economy will be a function of our ability to execute language here and then have our Washington youth graduate, go on to post-secondary success, and take those language skills around the world. 1 in 3 US employers say their world language needs are not currently being met, but the demand is there for them. And of course, 1/4 of employers tell us that they have lost a business opportunity because they did not have enough multilingual speakers in their organization to make those connections either in state or out of state. It just could not be more powerful right now for this state to become the first state in the United States of America to offer a universal opportunity in every school district in the state of Washington, where parents can have a choice to have their students learn in a multilingual opportunity. Again, mostly two-way. Sometimes, though, it is sort of single language, single course, but in most of it in the early grades, we really want to see this as two-way dual language. Let's talk specifically about what we're offering up here and what we'll partner with the legislature to expand. As I said, currently 42 districts, 102 school buildings, 35,000 students. We're going to more than double this. We're seeking grants in this next year, the 23-24 year. So not the school year we're in. We'll meet with the legislature this year. We'll try to get grants funded for the coming school year. 49 additional districts in dual language programming. That turns into, by the 26-27 year, those startup grants and those development grants become full-scale program launches. So by the 26-27 school year, those 49 districts will join the existing ones, and we will more than double the program. It's got a huge growth in the number of potential students, which we'll talk a little bit about. These are already districts of a little bit larger size generally, so the opportunity for families is big right now. Nearly half of our students would be in a district today with an opportunity, a pathway, a choice option in their community. What we're trying to do is get those districts to build it out to all of their elementary schools and then add additional districts who haven't yet started. By the 29-30 school year, we would want 34 more districts implementing dual language programs. And then by 2040, you're picking up a lot of districts that are very, very small. They may not have the scale at this point in time, but we want them on the planning process as soon as possible so that by 2040, all Washington districts have a dual language K-8 opportunity for families. Again, but well before that, even by 2030, so in the next 6 or 7 years, you're picking up about 80 or 90% of all of the possibility of students in the districts by focusing on the ones who are most ready today, who have a volume of students who are already providing that opportunity for half the class to be one language and half the class to be another primary language, and then sharing that. That moment sits before us right now. The program obviously builds all the way through middle school. It does mean that our high school teachers who have been heroic in world language for decades in this state, trying to introduce this for the first time to most high school students, they've got to rethink what it means to have students starting as early as 3 and 4-year-olds and certainly 5-year-olds getting so much language comprehension and so much multilingualism that by the time they get to high school, they want a very different experience than Spanish 1 or French 1. They are way beyond that. And so you're talking about quite a transformation in high school for those who are ready, and still having these programs available in high school for that student who says, I've never done this. My parents didn't opt me into that. So I'm taking Spanish or French or German or Russian for the first time. Those programs will stay. There's no replacement of those. They'll be in place. And of course, one of the powerful things that we hope to do is ultimately make this about students achieving that seal of biliteracy. It has market value. It means something to employers that students have gone through some form of formal assessment to demonstrate that they are truly multilingual. And when that happens, their economic opportunity is obviously very, very significant. It does cost some resources. We've said we're going to be ambitious this next cycle in the legislature. This transformation, while very reasonable compared to some enormously large, what I'll say, prototypical investments that ultimately, sort of cost immediately to everybody. This one is so targeted and so focused, and begins with these planning grants that we're talking about $12.8 million. For the next biennium to get these planning grants started for that next cohort that we talked about. There's $6 million here in stipends or bonuses. This is part of the game-changing effort that makes this possible. These teachers have often worked in isolation. People think of them as sort of one classroom down the hall. When you center this work in schools and you have that expectation everywhere, we need to continue to develop a cohort of bilingual educators to do the work. So we're talking about a $5,000 stipend for those who are in these teaching programs who are bilingual or multilingual, a $1,500 bonus for any paraeducator that's supporting that classroom. So we want market incentives. We want financial recognition of this skill set, because that's what's going to transform the entire opportunity faster and faster. We've got big ambitions about what we call a residency program, where we really are developing teachers for a full year in their student teaching experience that's paid. So you're not one of these students who leaves your university and says, I still have rent back in Pullman or up in Bellingham or in Seattle or in Cheney, and then I got to go to a student teaching experience for half a semester, find a place to rent there. I'm still paying tuition. I'm not getting paid for the experience. It is a real dead end for people who think they want to be educators, walk up to the end of their education cycle and go, wait a second, this is impossible for me. We want fully paid residencies focused on this population as a start. That gives us an enormous opportunity to recruit folks to the teaching field, specifically in bilingual education. And then there's some cost to getting students their seal of biliteracy. There's development in how you move students that far. There are assessment costs as well. Because we're a state that's offering this in 83 languages, there's a lot of work when you're offering the seal of biliteracy in a school district where maybe there's only a few students who speak that language or who built mastery towards that. So there is a little bit of cost there. Overall, $18, $19, $20 million or so for the next biennial ask. And then as we continue to build cohorts, there's a little bit of cost to that along the way. This is obviously an enormous opportunity for our students and our families. We're talking about $137, $140 per student is the cost of doing this. That's about a 1% increase in basic ed funding for students engaged in this program. So a lot of the old rhetoric around this is you need 2 teachers and you're doubling the cost in the classroom. That isn't true. You definitely need 2 teachers who have significant competency in one of the languages, and then they're really exchanging students. So it isn't doubling up classrooms. It isn't doubling the cost. It's actually very small relative cost in order to scale programs. We're excited about this. Obviously, we've thought about this in a comprehensive way. How do you add program startup dollars? How do you have ongoing program funding, which is a part of this? How do you provide the financial incentives for educators to become bilingual through residency programs, stipends for teachers once they're in the programs, and of course, professional development along the way. I want to give a little bit of a shout out to some of the folks who've been doing this work for a long time. I just got an email from an educator yesterday who said, I've been doing this for a very long time and it's felt awfully lonely. We did it out of passion. We did it out of heart. We convinced our school board to do this in one classroom, but we've kind of been doing it on our own because there isn't an infrastructure in the state to think about this comprehensively. 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds entering the world as truly multilingual learners the way, the competition is around the world. And to those educators, thank you. Thank you for keeping this thing going while we could. We've been injecting grant dollars along the way, which is pretty awesome. But this is something way more comprehensive. This asks our state legislature to think about Washington State, not as a state in the union, but as its own entity in a global competition, and give our students every opportunity in the world. And that means real investments immediately and sustaining those through time. So thanks to all those educators. We're thinking about you, and to all of our teachers, our administrators, our parents and students, congratulations getting to the new school year. This isn't everywhere yet, but it'll get there. But I hope you have an awesome school year. Let's make sure we get some questions. Katie will take those from folks. And a reminder, let's focus on this for now, but you may have questions on prior innovation releases or anything else. We're happy to answer everything that we can today. Ooh.
Oh, here we go. Jeannie Lindsay with Seattle Times.
Hello. I'm curious, this plan is pretty long-term. I mean, you're talking 2040 statewide implementation. How do you ensure that the momentum on this particular effort is maintained throughout that time, especially given the fact that, I mean, you said off the top, this is one of 9, big picture topics. So how do you sustain that momentum among, state policy folks in order to get to that 2040 statewide rollout?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Just a quick reminder specifically to that, and I'll talk bigger picture. We end up with about 90 or 95% of all students in a school district within the next 7 years where this program is available. It's that last group of very small districts that will take more time. I expect that to be much, much sooner, but I hope you will think about this as by 2030, you've essentially got the districts that make up 85 to 90% of all of our students with an active program. So that answers sort of the timing of that and the volume question. You asked a powerful point here. We are not simply responding to a pandemic. Much of what you saw in the growth of this occurred and began when we got here to this team, thinking about what prepares our students for success for the long term. And well before anyone heard of COVID, we were engaging in this kind of work. And you saw that the programs doubled in 4 or 5 years here with legislative support. So I think one of the mistakes we make is saying to the legislature, here's 9 ideas, you need to do them tomorrow. What we have to do is lay the vision, the comprehensive vision that connects all of the component parts so that they can see what it means to have an education system that is absolutely transformative over the next several biennial cycles, and then work with them to figure out how they want to fund that in pieces. So they'll do a part of this. That's why we're not proposing all of it one time. But if they keep the momentum going and add the next $18 to $20 million, we'll double this program. And that's the kind of momentum we're talking about here. It's very, very reasonable. And as I said, we need time to get these multilingual educators thinking about this kind of programming, or maybe they're a student who's been done. Maybe they're one of the 3,500 students who got a seal of biliteracy and are thinking about teaching today. I want to give them the confidence that this program is going to build, and they're going to have an opportunity to work as an educator of the state of Washington with financial incentive to be successful. So it's time. It's, as you indicated, it's time, but the investments build over time, and we've seen great momentum already from our policymakers.
Thanks, Jeannie. Next up, we have Dennis Khan from the
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So as far as dual language programs, I'm more familiar with like whole buildings being like, multilingual. And I was wondering, is this going to require districts to dedicate like a building, like an entire, elementary school or middle school to a dual language program, or kind of are there other models that are out there?
Yeah, thank you, Venice. So we don't see that today. What we see is school districts who are engaged in the program generally identify 1 or 2 of their elementary schools to be sort of a center of excellence of this, and then families choice into it. We give families choice within that district to say, I really want my student in that program, and districts try to figure out methods for those families to make that decision. We are getting to the place where we've got some elementary schools that are, so comprehensive in this that I think they, they're on the cusp of thinking through a little bit about, hey, when do we make this transition so that every student who comes here is in the program? But it's a local option here. We talk about this a lot. We're setting the policy expectation that everyone will have one of these choice options. We're setting up the framework where the resources are available to recruit, retain, support the educators, and give them ongoing funding. And then districts will make individual choices on which elementary school. Is it this neighborhood because it's got a concentration of learners ready for this, or is it this elementary school because we've got the professional staff there? They're going to figure out how to scale within a building and how many buildings in the beginning that they want this option available. But again, by 2030, we want this to be a universal option. When you bring your 5-year-old and you have that tough moment as a parent that I remember, and there's a tear in your eye because you're sending them with that giant backpack into the school, you want the option to know that your student is going to leave that elementary school and go to middle school having learned at least a second language for 5 or 6 years. That's the place we're moving towards.
Don't have any other schools saying that they have any questions right now. So if you want to start your closing.
Great. Again, I want to thank folks who are already a part of the series. Our team works really, really hard here. We can follow up with any questions that you have. The state of Washington is already poised to come out of the pandemic, as we've seen, with some gains off of what was a really tough time, both academically, attendance-wise, and enrollments. We're seeing that momentum build back again. We keep saying we'll be a system that recovers, but not a system that goes backwards. And whether it's capital investments or credit flexibility, or really giving students the ability to be bilingual learners in the world. And then, we've got a very exciting thing coming on school meals in the next couple of weeks. We want everyone in the state of Washington to understand that they are already in a system that's pretty darn good. It's pretty excellent by all objective measures. We can be better. We can use our dollars more strategically, thinking about what our students will need to be successful in the future, and we can go grab more dollars. I say that not with anything but pure respect for the challenges our legislature has. They've got complicated issues, from issues of housing affordability, issues of chemical dependency, and mental health well beyond school children. So I know the comprehensive job that they have is difficult, but I will say to you again, and we'll share the data when we release our full budget here in a month or so, it is okay to be honest about what we do in the state of Washington. And the honest truth is, we're a pretty darn good state. We still invest less of our total gross state product, our total economic activity. We spend less of that back into our public schools than the national average. We spend less of our economic activity in the state of Washington back into our schools than the national average. Now, we were in really desperate shape 5 years ago, and our legislature has stepped up in an amazing way. Incredible leadership to add $4 or $5 billion to that on an annual basis. But the private sector economy hasn't stopped growing, and the needs of students haven't stopped growing. And so when we adjust for all of that, there's a ways to go to get us just to the national average. I don't want to fill it up with things we've done in the past that aren't proven successes. I want to fill that gap up with things that we know will make our students the most successful going forward. Investing in their nutrition, their school safety, their multilingualism, intensive learning systems, the ability to be bilingual, the ability to have opportunities in their districts. We're going to be a state that leads out of this for the country and the world, and we can do it and still invest at the level that is the national average, and we're not there yet. Thanks for being a part of this. We will see you in a couple of weeks with another awesome innovation.